This is a retelling of what was said in federal court during Sean Diddy Combs' trial, based on reports from inner-city press. In an unexpected turn of events, Wendy Williams, the outspoken media icon they once tried to quiet, has now appeared in court to testify. After years of whispers, doubt, and pushback from the industry, Wendy is now speaking openly. Her testimony goes beyond just Diddy. She's shedding light on a culture of cover-ups, silence, and ongoing abuse in the world of hip-hop and entertainment. She named names from Jay-Z to R. Kelly and spoke on everything from being shut out by radio stations to being pressured with NDAs. Wendy didn't hold back. She brought specific dates, quotes, and some disturbing memories. This wasn't gossip or a talk show moment. It was sworn testimony in a courtroom, and everyone was paying close attention. What she revealed about Diddy, Jay-Z, and their disturbing ties could shake the foundation of the entire industry. Get ready, because Wendy Williams just brought her signature boldness straight into the courtroom. When Wendy Williams walked into the courtroom, it didn't feel like just another celebrity showing up. It felt like someone who had been pushed aside for years and finally got the chance to speak. She wasn't there for attention or controversy. She was there because for a long time, the media tried to shut her down with legal threats, exclusion, and public ridicule. Now everything she once hinted at during her old radio days, all the warnings and rumors, had become part of a federal case. She took her seat, looked straight at the jury, and slowly adjusted the microphone. Then she said clearly, "I was never being dramatic, never angry, and I never made anything up." She got straight to the point, making it clear why she was there, to speak the truth under oath. Wendy came to lay out the threats, secrets, and repeated actions she had long claimed were led by Sean Diddy Combs. "When I first spoke about Diddy," she said, "it wasn't to destroy him. It was to make people pay attention." The courtroom watched as she set a thick stack of documents in front of her. Old show transcripts, emails from industry executives, and a detailed timeline of what Diddy had supposedly done to silence her. She began her account from the early 2000s. "Everyone knew he was untouchable," she said. "Mention his name, and your phone would ring within the hour." She described how station managers would caution her, how sponsors suddenly backed out, and how the threats came. Not loud, but clear enough to understand. "They kept telling me, 'You're going too far, Wendy. You're going to get yourself hurt.'" She recalled a time she was actually followed out of her radio station by a girl group, who she claimed were sent by Diddy. "I said they were broke on air, and just hours later, they were outside my building. That wasn't a random run-in. That was planned." Wendy compared her career to a battlefield. "Whenever I spoke out about Diddy, whether it was his parties or how he treated his artists, something in my life fell apart. A sponsor would pull out, a syndication deal vanished, or an invitation from a network disappeared. But Wendy stood her ground. 'You can try to shut me out or scare me, but you can't make me disappear. Now that I'm speaking under oath, I hope they're paying attention, because I'm not going to stop until the truth is loud enough to break their system.'" When the prosecutor asked Wendy about the environment around Diddy, she shifted focus to another figure she had warned about for years. Jay-Z. Her voice grew firm. "You can't really understand what Diddy did without mentioning those who stood by him, who smiled alongside him while the abuse went on. That includes Jay-Z." Leaned forward. "Do you all remember Foxy Brown? She was just 15, and Jay-Z was 27, and he was involved in her life everywhere." She then shared lyrics from Foxy Brown's first album, songs said to have been written by Jay-Z. She read the lyrics out loud, clearly and slowly. "Ain't no one like the one I got. No one can love me better." The courtroom visibly reacted. "Think about it," she said. "Why would an adult man write lyrics like that for a teenager?" Then she went on, sharing insider details only someone familiar with the industry would understand. There were stories about Jay-Z picking Foxy up from school, giving her expensive gifts, taking her on shopping trips, and paying for hair appointments, all from a man nearly twice her age. This wasn't just a business deal, it was grooming. Then Wendy revealed something even more disturbing, rumors of a secret tape. For years, people talked about it, but it never surfaced. The tape supposedly involved Jay-Z, Foxy Brown, and Jamie Foxx. You probably never heard about it again. That's because Foxy's house was broken into and the tape disappeared. She paused, letting the question linger. Was it just a coincidence? She didn't think so. Wendy said she lost her top-rated radio show soon after raising concerns about Jay-Z's connections with underage girls. They labeled me as toxic, she said, but now it's clear that the questions I asked were important. When the prosecution asked if she had real proof, Wendy gave a firm nod. I have emails, call records, and producers who dropped out of my show once I mentioned Jay's name, she told the court. Wendy explained how Jay-Z's team quietly contacted people in the industry to blacklist anyone who talked about Foxy. They made me the bad guy, she said, just for asking questions anyone with a conscience should ask. Then she faced the jury directly. You think I lost sponsors because I caused drama? No, I lost them because I was telling the truth, and they didn't want that getting out. Next, Wendy prepared to share what she called the part no one wanted to hear. This was the section that got her called a liar, a troublemaker, and worse. Wendy told the court, I was the first one to say it. Those weren't just parties. She was talking about the notorious freak-offs, a term now key to the federal charges against Diddy. Wendy said she first caught wind of these events back in the late 90s, when Bad Boy Records was at its height. Phones were collected at the entrance, and guests had to sign NDAs. There were candles, escorts, and cameras everywhere. People were assigned to specific rooms. This wasn't just a regular party. It was a planned ritual. Wendy mentioned Karen Superhead Steffens, who had told her on air that Diddy invited her to one of these events and requested male participants. Superhead told the full story. She didn't hold anything back. Wendy talked about Diddy's paranoia, his drug use, and the strange setups at these events. She said he was scared she would reveal the truth. Leaning in, Wendy added, I made sure people heard that interview. She played it over and over because the story was too important to ignore. She shared that others, both men and women who attended Diddy's parties, had told her similar stories. They didn't just come to party, they left visibly shaken. Guests were instructed on how to act, what to wear, who they could interact with, and which rooms to enter. Wendy testified that she had personally spoken to 3 people who said IV bags were used to help recover after these parties, exactly like what the court indictment describes. They also mentioned that medical assistants were on hand, ready to help. This wasn't just socializing, it was carefully planned depravity. Wendy presented a list using only fake names of people who had shared their stories with her privately. The courtroom was silent in shock. One by one, these accounts lined up with what other witnesses, like Cassie Ventura and Gene Deal, had described in their testimonies. Then Wendy said something that struck everyone deeply. The baby oil? I mentioned it on my show as a joke, but it wasn't a joke at all. They actually found over 1,000 bottles. Just like I said. How did I know? Because people told me, and I was the only one brave enough to say it. Wendy settled back in her chair, calm and collected, and glanced over at Diddy. After all these years, we're finally at this point. This isn't just gossip anymore. It's proof. The courtroom grew quiet as she then turned her attention to someone she had stood up for over the years, Cassie Ventura. I said it then, she said firmly, keeping her gaze on the jury. You all got caught up in the diamonds, the music videos, and the red carpets. But I saw a scared young woman. Something wasn't right, and I said so on the air. There was something off about that relationship. Wendy shared that as early as 2008, she tried to warn her listeners about the intense control Diddy seemed to have over Cassie. She was only 19, and he was almost 40. That wasn't love. It was power. Wendy described how Diddy's wealth, private jets, security detail, and powerful influence made it nearly impossible for Cassie to walk away. I said it back then, and I'll say it again. She didn't need a boyfriend. She needed protection. She reminded everyone in the courtroom of a clip she once played on her show, where Cassie avoided eye contact and visibly flinched when Diddy raised his voice during an interview. Many called it just nerves, but Wendy saw something deeper. I called it trauma, Wendy said, but nobody listened. The prosecution then introduced a timeline of Wendy's broadcasts that lined up closely with Cassie's legal claims. I was told Diddy had access to her phones, that he'd show up at hotels unannounced, that staff were ordered to unlock her doors, Wendy explained, pausing for emphasis. And the moment I said that out loud, my show sponsors pulled the plug. Wendy then brought up a 2018 incident when Cassie reportedly ended the relationship after Diddy allegedly forced his way into her home. That wasn't the first time he showed up uninvited, Wendy testified. People don't understand. When a mogul wants control, they don't ask for permission. They make the world bend to their will. Wendy gave the court a chilling breakdown of how these dynamics play out. Grooming, isolating, leveraging industry power, and using the illusion of luxury as a tool for obedience. He didn't just love Cassie, he owned her. And when Cassie broke free from that control, she became dangerous to him. Wendy closed this section of her testimony with quiet certainty. Everything in that lawsuit, I saw the signs. I said it out loud. And now, finally, she's being heard. But at what cost? Wendy adjusted her microphone once more. Her voice didn't tremble, but it slowed, heavy with meaning. You can't speak out against powerful men like Diddy without facing consequences. I understood that, but I didn't grasp just how far it would reach until it actually happened. She said that back in 2004, when her radio show was at its highest point, a record label executive warned her to stop mentioning Puff or face the consequences. Wendy didn't back down. The week after, she was taken off her afternoon show. There was no hiding the reason. It was clearly because of him. She called it a punishment. Wendy shared that several people told her Diddy had made deliberate calls to record label executives, promoters, and radio stations, telling them to cut ties with her. She remembered a program director telling her straight up, "You crossed the line. You stirred up the wrong person." Wendy also shared how she was nearly confronted outside her own studio by the girl group Total after she called them washed up and broke on air. And this wasn't a coincidence. They were sent there on purpose. Wendy described the scene clearly. Fans crowded the radio station's lobby windows, her boyfriend waiting anxiously in the car, and her intern panicking inside. That wasn't simply a warning. It was a clear message that they could reach me anytime. She went on to explain how she was excluded from BET events, refused media credentials, and lost advertising contracts. Everything was planned and deliberate. Diddy didn't just aim to silence me, he wanted to wipe me out completely. She presented printed emails from PR firms working with Bad Boy back then, all making it clear they were cutting ties with her show. One message stated, following client orders, that they would no longer schedule any talent on Wendy Williams' program. That client? Sean Combs, Wendy revealed as she held up the paper. I wasn't the first to be shut down, she said, but I was one of the few who kept speaking out. Looking at the jury, she added, that's how he works. If you speak up, you lose everything. Your platform, your income, your reputation. But I didn't back down. I kept talking, even when no one else would. And here I am, she said, pausing for a moment as if reflecting on something almost unbelievable. Looking back, she noted how hip-hop was going through a very open phase about sexuality. She quoted herself saying that wasn't an insult. It was just the truth. For speaking out, she said, she faced serious backlash. Wendy went on to explain that in the early 2000s, there was a silent but powerful push to shield some big names by attacking anyone who dared to question them. She recalled having Charlemagne on her show during that time. Even back then, she said, everyone knew there were things you just didn't say if you wanted to keep your job. But she spoke up anyway. She mentioned her 2004 book, The Wendy Williams Experience, which was filled with hints and subtle warnings about Diddy, Jay-Z, and the secret lives they led. At the time, people dismissed it as gossip. Now the government sees it as proof. Wendy then told the court about a 2009 interview she did with former Bad Boy artist Mark Curry, who had just published Dancing with the Devil. He described Diddy as the shadow that destroys lives. I agreed with him. But after that interview aired, it suddenly vanished from the radio station's archives. She explained to the court that whenever she tried to bring on guests who spoke critically about the industry, like Superhead, Gene Deal, or Jaguar Rife, she faced constant resistance. There were threatening emails, complaints to the FCC, in every attempt to silence her. They tried shutting me down from every direction. Then she revealed something that really grabbed the court's attention. There was an unspoken list, no official record, but everyone in the industry knew about it. A list of people you just couldn't mention. And when I crossed that line, I faced the consequences. She said her Hot Topic segments were regularly flagged for review. Producers got threats from talent agents, and executives privately warned her to back down. They told me I was risking everything. For them, for the station, and for myself. She paused before continuing, but now everything's unraveling. Because the truth has finally come out. Wendy's voice softened as she concluded this part. This trial isn't just a new chapter, it's the end of a long cover-up. And I want the jury to understand, I've been raising this alarm for 2 decades. Now you're finally hearing it. Wendy turned her gaze back to the courtroom, her voice now sharper and more focused. You think this is only about Diddy? You're mistaken, she said, meeting the jury's eyes. This case is about the entire system that shielded him. People whose names you were never meant to hear in a courtroom. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey. When Wendy named them, a heavy silence filled the courtroom. The prosecution asked her to explain, and she spoke plainly. There's a list in Hollywood, she said. One you'll never see or hold in your hands. But it's real. It's the list of people you don't cross. And if you do, you vanish. Wendy shared what happened after her controversial radio shows where she spoke out against not just Diddy's parties in control, but also accused Tyler Perry of secretly blocking her career. She said, I had real sources, producers, agents, who told me straight up, Wendy, your name is being talked about. They don't want you bringing up certain things. She said they started calling her unstable. After her split with the Precious Team, a movie where both Perry and Oprah had big roles, her industry connections just vanished. She went from getting invites to premieres to suddenly being left off the guest lists altogether. One executive told me straight up, Oprah's team doesn't want you anywhere near her anymore. That's real power, and that power was used to shield people like Diddy. Then Wendy shared something personal. She said she once opened up to Oprah about her own experiences with abuse. Oprah told her she respected her and promised never to use that story against her. Then suddenly, my abuser was on her show, being interviewed, while I was the one being shut out. Wendy said that wasn't just betrayal, it was revenge. The jury sat in shock as she spoke openly. They laughed with him, took photos, stood by Diddy while the rest of us faced the consequences for speaking up. And I understand why. They needed him, for business deals, for influence, and to keep things quiet. Then she shared an email that was accidentally sent to her from a PR firm managing crisis communications for both Perry's studio and a Bad Boy-related brand. The subject line read, Managing Optics, Wendy. Puff. The email simply said, Tyler. That was enough for her. Wendy looked straight ahead and said, these aren't just a few famous people. They're part of a system that thrives on silence and crushes anyone who tries to expose the truth. The courtroom grew quieter with every word. Then came a moment the prosecutors later called a turning point. Wendy pulled out a thick folder. She tapped the cover of the folder and said, this contains NDAs, email exchanges, and internal notes that were never meant to be made public. She explained she didn't get them by hacking, but from former insiders who had left the industry and were fed up with the silence. Fed up with seeing women vanish and the truth dismissed as gossip, Wendy started reading from a 2007 NDA. The name was blacked out, but the terms were clear. The person agreed not to reveal any private events, recordings, or encounters involving Sean Combs, his guests or associates. She read on. Breaking the agreement could lead to heavy fines and public backlash. She slammed the paper down, emphasizing public retaliation, showing just how far it went. Then she shared an internal email from a luxury hotel describing preparations for a presidential suite with special touches like extra linens, candlelight, and strict privacy measures. She explained that Mr. Combs' assistant would arrive early to prepare before guests came in. The email was dated 2015, back when Cassie was still with Diddy. Wendy asked, do you think this was just typical celebrity partying? No. She said it was a carefully organized system. planned, funded, scheduled, and cleaned up afterward. She then revealed proof of payments made to publicists, talent managers, and bloggers to control the story. One email even told a writer to avoid mentioning recent rumors and instead focus on Diddy's charitable work. Next, prosecutors showed the jury a photo from a 2019 gala featuring Diddy, Tyler Perry, and a well-known media consultant who handles crisis management. Wendy pointed out that while they all smiled for the cameras behind the scenes, women were being paid to stay silent and others faced ruin for refusing to comply. She told the court that she was also offered a non-disclosure agreement. They wanted her to stay quiet, promising a syndicated TV show if she agreed to stop talking about certain subjects. But she refused and suffered the consequences. The courtroom was quiet as Wendy finished, saying that the silence they paid for had stolen people's freedom, peace, and truth, and now, little by little, it's all coming to light, one NDA at a time. Through it all, Wendy stayed strong until the very end. Wendy's voice stayed steady as she said, "You see Diddy on trial, but I see something much bigger." Then, with quiet conviction, she pointed toward the defense table. "This isn't just about what he did, it's about who let him do it." The weight of 20 years of speaking out hung heavy in the room, but she didn't waver. Not a tear, just undeniable truth. You might see just one person, but behind him stands a long history of silence, a system built on fear, secret agreements, and deals made in private. She looked straight at the jury and said that whenever anyone tried to speak up, this system would crush them. She reminded everyone in the courtroom that even though Diddy was on trial, others like Jay-Z, Perry, Oprah, the record labels and managers had stayed quiet for years. Some even witnessed the wrongdoing up close. They shook his hand, accepted his money, and made sure anyone who asked tough questions was shown the door. Wendy finished her statement with the same bold, honest voice that made her famous on the radio. "They called me bitter, they called me crazy, but I was right, and I'd rather be right in hell than stay silent in heaven." She turned her gaze to Diddy, who had stayed mostly calm during her entire testimony. "You believed I was finished. You believed your influence would protect you. But now, here you are, facing the truth at last. And I hope everyone hears it loud and clear." Before leaving the stand, Wendy glanced once more at the courtroom audience. This trial isn't the conclusion, it's the start of people speaking out, of cracks forming in the walls of silence, and one day, the whole system coming down. Then, without another word, she walked away, not as a talk show host or gossip reporter, but as someone whose truth can't be ignored any longer.